Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Lisa Rohr, and I want to welcome you to the information session on digital transformation with MIT Professional Education. I'm delighted to be here with you. We've just opened up the webinar. People are still coming in. So while people are coming in and while we're waiting for everybody to get to the webinar, I would encourage you to go up into or down into the menu where you can see the chat button. If you click into the chat button, I would love to hear where you're sitting today. So I'm here with our esteemed faculty. We're all in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but I know that people are probably from many, many other places in the world. When you do chat in, if you can chat to all participants and all attendees and panelists, then everybody will be able to see. So let's see, we've got Mexico City, Brazil, Billings, Montana, New Hampshire, South Africa, Cleveland, San Jose, London, Brooklyn, Peru, Germany. It's all going so fast, it's a little hard to see it all. Egypt, Ottawa.
Cape Town.
Excellent.
That's exciting.
Switzerland. Yes. So this is wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing where you are today. One of the things that is so exciting about these online courses is the global community that come together around topics of mutual interest. And so I think this is a great example of the kind of global community that we form in these courses. So thank you very much for being here today. We're excited to share more information about this great program we have on digital transformation. And I'll turn it over to our faculty in a minute, but before I do, I just wanted to also share a little bit of housekeeping, which is we want to make sure that we answer as many questions that you have about the program as possible. And the way that we're going to do that is actually through the Q&A box. So if you go down to where you found the chat box, you should also see a Q&A box. If you do have a question that you'd like to pose to our panelists or our program advisors, please put it into the Q&A box. After the end of the presentation, we'll save some time to get to as many of those questions as we can. At the same time, we have program advisors on the line here today, and for those questions that are around registration questions and administrative questions, they'll answer those directly in the Q&A box. They'll type in the answers, so you can see those answers as they come in. But we will save time at the end of this webinar to verbally address questions that you might have for the faculty who are here today. So with that, let me just give a little bit of introduction to this course on digital transformation, and then the faculty will talk in more detail about what you can expect in this type of a course. So this course is a survey course of many of the technologies that are impacting business and society today, from blockchain and artificial intelligence to cybersecurity, the cloud, and the Internet of Things. So you'll have an opportunity to get some exposure and some hands-on exercises with all of these different technologies. And we'll explain more about that over the coming hour. With me today, I'm very, very pleased to have Dr. Abel Sanchez, who's a research scientist at MIT and executive director of MIT's Geospatial Data Center. Abel has been a great collaborator in creating this course and really has a lot of creative ideas and expertise in this area. And if you haven't seen his TEDx talk on the future of education, it is extremely fascinating. I recommend going to look it up. We also have Dr. John Williams, who's professor of information engineering at MIT. And as you can see, he's internationally recognized in the field of computer algorithms and is widely published and an expert in computer networks. So John and Abel, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can bring up some of the slides that you've prepared for today.
Can you see my screen?
We can.
Yeah.
It's in, we're seeing the presentation mode though, Abel.
So let me, I thought I chose the right one. Let me try again. Oh, here we go. How about this time? Is it the right one? Or is it still presentation mode?
It's still in presentation mode.
Okay, so I think it's playing tricks with me, but so I'll just go with desktop. How about now?
Looks good.
Okay, excellent. Great, so welcome everyone. John and I are teaching this course, and the very first thing you should know about us is that we're deeply passionate about technology. This is something we spend our time and have spent our life thinking about, and we love to discuss the topics. There's a number of topics that we will be going into in a moment, but we wanted to start off by giving you some sense of where we are and where we come from. So when it comes to, the machine is fighting my mouse control. Let me see if I can get it back. Here we go. Okay, excellent. Let me move this to the side. It's always fun when you're talking about technology and technology is fighting you, right? But we are in the city of Boston, the very pretty city of Boston. You can see here a little red arrow to where we are. This is where the MIT campus is, across the river from Boston and the city of Cambridge. And that's literally where our offices are, where that little red arrow is. If you don't know much about Boston, one of the things you might have heard of is our sports teams. It is a very passionate sports culture in the area. And one of the reasons is because there's great success. If you follow basketball, you know that the city has been sadly eliminated. And if you follow football, you know that they won the Super Bowl last year. And the same is true for the other two, baseball and Bruins. There's been great success in that space. The other thing, more relevant thing that you should know about Boston is that it's one of the big educational hubs of the world. There's over 100 colleges and universities in the area. Over 250,000 students are attending. And if you count in the faculty and all of the people affiliated with the universities, in summer, there's a change of about 1 million people in the city of Boston, which is great for commuters because we can get to work a lot quicker. And we always feel that pain in September where everybody comes in. Here's a more relevant picture. This is a picture you see and you saw in my background before. This is sort of the pretty picture of MIT. And the other thing we will share as well is that it's a place where it gets very, very cold. John likes to say that this is what makes us productive because we don't want to go outside, and it's a great motivator to stay inside and work. And when we say cold, by the way, we really mean cold. This is a picture of the front of my house in one of the snowstorms this year. You can imagine I got about 18 inches is the most I've ever gotten in one snowfall. And you can see there I lost a bunch of trees under the weight of the snow. The branches just snapped off. But getting back to the topic of today, I'll start off with one of the most important topics, which is the topic of cloud. And yesterday, John and I were having a conversation about what cloud is. Most people think they know. And I was making the argument to him that if you think you know what cloud is, you don't understand cloud. So let me pause there and give John a chance to jump in and comment.
Yeah. So I think one of the things, as Abel was saying, we're passionate about software. We still code. We spend all our time learning the technologies. You don't have to kind of spend your life as, we're saying we've spent a large part of ours. So our goal is really to get you to use these technologies so that you understand them enough that you understand their potential and what they can do. And the cloud is certainly, probably if you're doing a digital transformation, the first thing your company will do is think about the cloud and how it can leverage the cloud. And as Abel was saying, the cloud is not just a lot of machines, as you see in this picture, but more the software and the applications and the services that are already running in the cloud that you can leverage. Today, you'll probably, if you go to the cloud, you'll use one of their databases. You won't run a database. They'll run it for you. A lot of these services are the reason that you can move fast in the cloud, and we'll talk a little bit about that, because today there's been, over the last few years, a revolution in DevOps. And we didn't call it out, but under cloud, there are a lot of technologies, containerization, container orchestration, etc. And these are changing so that, as Abel says, if you think you know what the cloud is, you might know what it was yesterday, but tomorrow it's going to be different. It's changing very quickly. Amazon put out a new product every 11 seconds. So even their marketing people often don't know exactly what the latest products are. Abel, I can see you smiling there.
Yeah. No, I'm laughing because we were having a meeting with the group from Amazon, and we were telling them about some product, and they say the way we often find out about what products we have is from clients, because they start asking us questions and we have to go look it up. And it's certainly a challenge. Like John said, most people show the 4 stacks of cloud, going from infrastructure as a service to software as a service. However, there's so much more to that. And your transition to be able to leverage what is in cloud is not at all an obvious one. Not only that, if you were to leverage the technology that exists by the major cloud vendors today, you'd be, without a doubt, one of the most advanced companies in the world, right? So it is not so much about creating new technologies, it's about understanding what exists and how do you use it. And this is something that you'll hear us say often. And there is a tremendous amount of resources that we'll cover in this course. Did you want to say something else?
I was just going to just interrupt you here a little, because as you say, I think the abstractions have changed. Now we talk about programming, but today it's more about how you glue together these pieces, how you interface them. That we're operating today at a very different level. And there are libraries, npm.js, which we'll talk about in the course, has just under 1 million libraries. So the first thing we do today is we don't sit down and start writing code. The first thing we do is we look in these libraries to see whether the product already exists. And in a lot of cases, we were talking earlier about image recognition, for example, that's a service that exists in the cloud, that you can show an image and it'll tell you what's in that image. It can recognize the types of cars, tell you exactly what's going down the highway, real time. So these are kind of some of the services that you need to know about and be able to leverage. But I think the important thing is to realize that the old style computer science courses that we used to teach, which were about data structures, they're still important, but there's an awful lot more that's been added on in terms of levels of abstraction. One of the things that we talk about in the cloud, for example, is infrastructure as software. That we can, in software, we can define how many machines we need and how they are provisioned. So we'll come back to that, and I know you want to go on, Abel. So
no, that's fascinating. And by the way, John and I often do this conversation, and helps us fill in the gaps that we might be missing. And that was a great point. We often say, you're solving the wrong problem. And the other thing that we like to say a lot is, why do we care? Right. And
well, why should you care? Right.
Yeah. Well, right. And one of the things we often come to is this question of abstractions and the rising level of abstractions and the speed and velocity that that gives you, right? Whereas before you had to care about everything from your power to the speed of your board and your RAM, and depending if you're in a very specialized field, that might still be true. However, for a great deal of applications, you can leverage technology stacks that already exist. And the challenge is, how do you bring them together? How do you understand what is possible? I keep on, making the argument that every 2 to 3 years, there's a new definition when it comes to possibilities, right? Every year, the technology vendors, right, Google, Amazon, Azure, stand up and say, here's our new offerings, right? And if you put them together every few years, you have a new set of abstractions that, again, give you that velocity. And I get excited and I see John smiling, so let me pass it back.
No, I'm smiling about us at MIT trying to decide whether to build a new data center.
Right.
And AWS has a T-shirt which says, "Friends don't let friends build data centers."
Yeah, that's a classic. Yeah.
It's right.
And if you haven't seen the numbers, building a new data center is about $1 billion, and every 18 months, you spend another $1 billion. And obviously, if you're building it for the first time, you're going to make all kinds of mistakes. And so, this is very much the trade-offs, right?
But it gives you an idea of the decisions that you have to make. In a company, do you build a data center? It's not obvious these days. It used to be, that would be cheaper. Now it's not clear. So we can have these discussions, and we do during the course, I think, but we should probably move on to the next big.
There's a lot more I want to say, but I think you're right, John. So let's move on to artificial intelligence. This is, I think, without a doubt, one of the most controversial. Just this morning, I was sharing with John an article from the city of San Francisco, who has decided to ban facial recognition because they think it's unethical to be able to use. And some of you might have seen the news from China that reportedly is profiling minorities and doing things that ethically the world is objecting to. But however, wherever you find, you land in this ethical debate, the questions of future work, the questions of true unbiased, predictive models are big ones, because, as I often like to say too, is, if the data comes from us and we're biased, surprise, surprise, our predictive models are going to be biased, right? But John, when it comes to the future of work, I'll pass it over to you, because I know you have a lot of thoughts in this space.
Well, this AI and this machine learning revolution has really got a history. That we were doing neural nets 20 years ago, but 20 years ago we didn't have the data, and the web and the revolution in Internet of Things, which we'll come to, has provided us with that stream, or actually tide of data that now we can train our machines on. And image recognition, now machines are superhuman at the image recognition. They can do better than any human. And various areas now are being taken over by machines. And so it's not that they're going to replace humans entirely. We can do things that machines can't do. There are functions, for example, that a machine can't calculate. So it's not like machines are going to be all pervasive. Humans have to be in the loop for some things. But certain jobs, I think, are going to get replaced by these machines. And you have to know, what are those jobs? And certainly now for companies, understanding their customers means that they need data on their customers. And what's changed is the banks used to know their customers. Now they don't. Amazon probably knows me far better than my bank and can do a risk analysis on me, whether they should lend me money or not, much better than probably a bank can. And so Abel and I always talk about this, that, the problem is not from your direct competitor. It comes from somewhere else. that someone else is doing something and has a totally different business model. And machine learning and AI are providing different business models. You know, Uber is a great example where they don't own taxis, they don't own cars, but their business model has basically is wiping out the taxi industry. Now the taxi industry is responding, and I think the competition has been good. You know, we use Uber a lot around campus because it's faster now than walking in the snow, or more pleasant. but certainly, I know you're showing this robot here, and I think it's one of the ones from a local company, Boston Dynamics. But we were looking at, there was a competition by DARPA for robots, and in 2012, none of the robots could complete the course that was set. In 2015, I think 95% of them completed the course. And so robotics in 3 years changed entirely. And, you know, it's continuing to change. So, Abel, you probably want to...
No, I mean, it's a fascinating topic, and in many ways, it's one that most people feel strongly about because it has to do with the future of employment, right? There are those that think that ultimately humans will be, you know, replaced, and for the most part, we feel that's an exaggeration. And as John said, you know, as humans, we can go laterally in ways that machines can't. But there's no denying the capacity in certain domains and narrow focuses, how effective that can be. One of the examples I like to give is that of a doctor, right? That if he or she were to look at skin cancer, the amount of samples that he or she could see in her lifetime is finite. But if you think of a collection that could be exponentially larger than that doctor's experience, we start to see systems that are more, that are better at predicting skin cancer than any doctor, right? And if you start to think about also the spread of knowledge, right? If you think about a car that can't maneuver, say, around a paper bag on a street, an autonomous car, but once that car learns that technique, you know, automatically all of the cars all over the world acquire that new capacity. They're certainly there if you think about acquiring knowledge and potentially evolution of how, you know, you transfer that knowledge, and acceleration that we haven't seen. And it's a fascinating topic, and I think the disruptions that are coming to the workplace, one of the things that we often talk about too is that the skill set that the current employee has is not the one that's needed. So if one of the favorite topics that we often engage on is that of our support staff here at our university, and that we wish they could do these simple integrations that we often do, but we end up having to train them to do the work that they're supposed to do for us more often than we think. And a lot of that has to do with just the infrastructure that's in place, the packages that are, you know, SAP and others. And we work with SAP, so that's not a criticism to SAP.
Abel, I'm smiling here because I'm looking at, there's a raging debate here on the chat window.
Oh, okay. So maybe we should go on so we can have some time.
Yeah, right. We'll leave it for the course, okay? But
yeah. Let's
people are calling.
Let's go on to a depressing topic of security, and John, I'll pass it back to you.
Well, no, we were just talking this morning about the attack on WhatsApp, and it's very, I mean, it's serious for sure, because you don't even have to answer your phone call. This attack is basically by a company that has a product called Pegasus that can infect phones without you having to click on any message or even answer the phone call. So they just phone you and you're infected. That's fairly serious. I mean, it's certainly serious for any security organizations. But today, cybersecurity particularly, and we like to call it cyber physical security because there's always the possibility that they just kick your doors down. And so it's not just software. but certainly security can take a company down. That it's one of those things that can threaten your existence. So it's something that you have to consider, but if you're going to do business, for example, it's going to cost you money and introduce, sand into the gears of your company to have high security. So you always have this trade-off that you'd like a certain level of security, but you don't want to cut yourself off totally from the internet, say, which the security agencies do. They have, air gaps. They're not allowed to talk about what they do. That slows them down. Actually, it's an impediment. So companies have this trade-off in the security area of they need to do the basic things. At some level, they're not going to have perfect security. And I know, Abel, you've done a lot of work on risk assessment in the security area. Maybe you want to say something about the work you've been doing.
Security is one of those that we often get depressed about, but I'll preface that by saying that pretty much everything we touch today relies on digital infrastructure. If you think about your day when you get your cup of coffee, that cash register is running software. If you get in your car, sadly, that's about 20 million lines of code, and there's already been documented examples on where the car braked where it shouldn't. And I know John has one of those experiences, or it accelerates when it shouldn't. But it's something that we see throughout everything. If you borrow a book, if you go to the supermarket, everything you touch. And now our devices in our home, right? Our router, our television, our oven, everything is getting connected, right? And so the questions of ransomware, one of the very visible problems, the questions of securities and our attacks on our phones, the attacks on our credentials. There's about 8 billion now in public domain of passwords that are possible, right? So there's tremendous challenges, and I think here's one where I can reference back to the previous topic that we're exceeding our capacity as humans to address this problem, right? We once don't have enough cybersecurity professionals, and two, our approach is simply not working. We have a chart that we'll show within the course that shows clearly that the cost of attack continues to decrease, right? It's cheaper and cheaper to launch more sophisticated attacks, and the cost to defend continues to decrease. The cost to defend continues to increase, which is a huge gap, right? And so how do we address this? Leads into the question of risk assessment. How do we put our arms around this growing threat that by products alone and by people alone, we can't, we're losing that battle? It's a lot of what we go into the course, but certainly our ability to function. And we've seen, top companies worldwide have to go offline for 6 months, meaning they've had to scrap their machines, and they've been communicating over Gmail and some other really drastic measures because they couldn't trust their equipment. But it's an existential threat to our modern world, right? Because this is now our infrastructure. And so we go into a lot of this discussion within the course, and I'll leave it there because again, we're running over. Any other comments, John? You look
No, I should just say that our experience is that it's an interdisciplinary problem. It's not a technical problem solely. It's not like computer science and encryption can solve everything. So what we've done is we run a summer course and we bring in all the experts we can. That it's not, like I say, it's not just a technical problem, security. That it's much more complex than that. In DevOps, it's interesting that they now employ chaos teams, and we'll talk about some of the things that some of the leading companies are doing. But certainly, managing your keys becomes a problem. As Abel knows, I had it myself. I, by accident, put some keys up into GitHub. Next day, I'd run out of my money on Amazon, that they'd stolen the keys. and spun up about 100 machines around the world and about 4,000 data volumes. It took me about half a day to manage to kill the machines and get control again. So certainly key management is a critical issue. Let's move on, though, that enough of the depressing side of security.
Yeah. So as usual, I have a lot more to say, but I'll save it for the course.
Yes.
Now, we can start.
Okay. Let me interview you on this, because the blockchain,
Yeah.
Abel is passionate. I just sold all my ethers yesterday because
I'm holding them.
the market has recovered slightly. So I just wanted to. I think we were joking. We both lost cars, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, blockchain. Certainly, Abel has tremendous potential. It went through a hype cycle. Maybe you can say something about what you think about the underlying technology and its possibilities.
So blockchain is an interesting technology, to say the least, right? It is also not a new technology. It's been in place for over 10 years, from the original paper from Satoshi Nakamoto. However, its promise has been in the wings, right? Some people like to say it's always within 3 years of being within 3 years, right? But given what we've seen in the last couple of years, there's a lot of maturity that's coming to it. And in many ways, it addresses many of the problems that we've seen on our previous stacks of technology. Most of the world is centralized in its issuing of credentials and in its management of technology and of the way in which you have administered and constructed these stacks. Now, the promise for blockchain is to create something that's quite different, that is decentralized, that is decoupled, that can't be turned off. So, to give you an example of a resiliency, if you were to run a web server on a blockchain network, it could not be turned off by any government or group, because there is no location where you can go and seize the computers and turn off the power. It is run on a peer-to-peer basis, and it is a resource that is, because of this design, very robust. Now, there's been some really, really interesting developments within the last year or so when it comes to tying it to the currency, to tying it or pegging it to a fiat currency. And I often like to talk about three components that I think really distinguish it from many other platforms. One of them is identity. The second one is a way to agree on the way in which we're going to describe our logic. So it would be contracts, and the last one is a currency. And in this last one, the currency, there's starting to be products that are programmatic money. So a lot of the possibilities of being able to manipulate and create business logic that can accelerate business in a true way around the world has been hampered by a lot of the walls and regulations that the traditional banking and government institutions have had. There's a lot of groups that are working to create stable coins, for example, and variants of that have the potential to make that truly programmatic, which means that you can transact. And if you have agreement on these components, you have a huge acceleration. And the potential there is more so to have truly one agreement, because for the most part, a lot of the success has come on private blockchains. And I'll leave it at that because I'm starting to get too deep, but let me give.
I was just going to say, I think the tokenization of things is part of that promise that most of the way we transact money today is not with physical money, that we just do it digitally. And so there's no reason why money can't be tokenized. And a lot of other things can be represented by tokens. And that means that they can be moved quickly. As I was saying, it took me about 10 seconds to sell my ethers this morning. Another 10 seconds to get them into US dollars, and about a couple of minutes to get them into PayPal, which is pretty impressive. If I go to my bank and try and send money across the country, it'll take me a day or two. So we're talking already that you can move money in, under a minute across the world, which is, and we have local companies here. Circle is one of the local companies. I shouldn't advertise, but they're so good. I think they do a couple of billion a week already, and they're a startup. Anyway, so I think blockchain, we're both enthusiastic about it. We think it's important to touch it. That we'll show you how to program it, how to write a smart contract, and that removes a lot of the mysticism, I think, from blockchain. So I think we probably said enough about that. We've got one more technology left.
Right. So once again, I want to say more, but I'll stop it there. We mentioned at the beginning we get passionate about these ideas, right? So the last one that I'd like to mention is that of IoT, and John led the lab that created the technology of RFID. So we've seen this problem from a lot of perspectives, and certainly from the time where there was an effort to put an identifier on every single fast-moving good around the world, and it's been interesting to watch that evolution. But I think one of the most interesting aspects is that intelligence that's coming to devices the world over and throughout all industries. So any comments on that?
Edge computing, right? Edge computing. Yeah. No, I think, as you say, Abel, we were both involved in the Internet of Things and the Auto ID Lab. And we thought the challenge was to get devices to talk to other devices. Maybe you want to say something about that.
So one of the challenges when it came to the RFID stack, and there was this picture, right, that there would be some pallet arriving at Walmart, and there would be some scanner, and the information would flow, and the world would be transparent, and we would all sing songs and grow flowers together, right? It was going to be great. The problem with that was that the information that is attached to physical devices in the RFID world, and I can comment further on that, was tied to an organization. And one of the interesting things about a physical good, as opposed to a digital good, is that it travels to different computational contexts. So the factory comes to being in a factory, there's a list of materials that goes to a distribution center, and there could be several hops. In the US, for example, pharmaceutical industry that we both took a look at, you can have as many as 13 hops. It touches 13 different places. And all of those 13 different places have different opinions about what information should be shared, how it should be shared, and a lot of concerns about regulation that's coming that might have legal implications. And so the outcome of this was 50 different states fighting regulation that was coming from the US government. We did a pilot in Florida, which was the only state that managed to pass chain of custody for pharmaceuticals that were tagged. But there's never been a national, in the United States, a national law or one that could be agreed upon on the state. So it turned out to be about a lot more than technology, as John said. And this promise of this perfect transparency was never realized. And there's now many other variants of devices that I think have a lot more potential. So let me pass it back to John.
I think, that in the last 20 years or 19 years since 2000 or so, when this first started, there's been a lot of progress. That, one of the things that we can do is control sensors. Today it's very easy to talk to, say, a camera in Beijing, that you can send messages, from your cell phone and control that camera. And the software to do that is not that complicated. The URL and some of the things that underlie the ease with which we can do this, is the technology of the web, which I think was the initial driving force that's given rise to, pretty much all of these technologies. And as Abel liked to say, nobody remembers Tim Berners-Lee, and he kind of invented all of this. He sits here actually just across a few buildings away.
In the building in your background.
And none of the young students know him, for for us, he's kind of like our hero in the 90s.
Right.
You know, he created all of this. And he wanders around campus and people kind of just don't know him. You know, so it's an interesting world. But, you know, these technologies that we've picked out here, I think, cover most of the basic technologies, not all, obviously. Somebody's mentioning 5G, I see online here, and certainly 5G, you know, is going to make a huge difference. How it'll be transformational, we can discuss. I'd say one of the things that we want to give you with this course is to point you to the basic building blocks, if you like, that you need to understand. That I call it getting your fingers on the ledge. That, you know, you need to be able to pull yourself up. All the information is out there on the web, but there's just a blizzard of it. And you need, you know, we'll act as kind of guides through, you know, through the mountains and through the mountain passes and hopefully take you to the other side. Yes, this is how it feels for most of us. You know, you're trying to drink from a fire hose or absorb all this information. And our sense is that, you know, you need to touch some of this to really understand it. It's no good just, you know, hearing the words that Abel, you know, in the course you talk about, you know, full stack developer. And it's kind of, what do you mean? Now, for some of us, if we know what full stack means, it's okay, it's meaningful. To a lot of people, it doesn't mean much. And so a lot of the barriers, I think, are to do with words, that you have to understand what they mean. You know, services can mean anything. Like you say, cloud, it can mean multiple things. We hope to ground you in the meaning of a lot of these words and the way people are looking at things. And there's a rich discussion to be had. I see we've got some pretty intelligent people online here, Abel. You want to finish off with the last few slides?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, certainly, I think, you know, it's overwhelming to think about all these topics, and like John said, we've chosen the very visible ones that are having a tremendous amount of impact. And the other thing is that we want you to ground that thinking. You can read all you want. There's a couple examples we'd like to give regarding reading, right? You can read all you want about swimming, but getting in the pool is different. And the example John often gives is that about reading about sword fighting, but you don't want to pick up a sword for the very first time where you're facing life or death, right? And so because of that, we give you a number of hands-on examples. The goal here is to give you a pleasant experience where you can attempt something that you might not think it's possible, and grounds that thinking on a specific technology. And for the most part, you know, for example, we do a 5-minute web server that can be globally accessed and a service to the world. And again, it's in 5 minutes. You know, that was once a undertaking that took months, and you would spend, you know, for a website in the 90s, it was not unheard of to spend $100,000, right?
I was going to say, it's like WhatsApp. How long would it take you to write WhatsApp today? Not that long.
Right, and that's
to polish it, but the basic technology is there. I think it's what, 20 lines of code and then another 15 lines for the client. It's not that much.
Right, and one of the things that we feel strongly about is that once you touch that, once you've done the 15 lines of code, you think differently about the technology. It actually grounds those concepts down, and you can think about them, you can move into the space, and then you can go as deep as you want, right? But our goal is to give you that hands-on experience, to give you access to those topics. And lastly, but very importantly, is to allow you to have some fun. We think this is tremendously fun. Again, we're at MIT, of course, right? But it is, you know, we had a student this semester that she said her advisor told her, I think you're becoming addicted to coding, right? Because once you start, sometimes it's hard to stop. It's just, you know, engaging. But let me stop there. I don't know if you want to say any last words, John. Otherwise,
no. I think that it opens doors. That it allows you to use tools and the tooling is changing. You know, historically, humans have always used tools. And now, you know, we have a new set of tools there that, I mean, spinning up 100 machines in the cloud, that gives you a feeling of power.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, yes, you should have fun. I think we should hand it back to Lisa, and
Right.
who can explain more about how the course is run and what you'll experience taking the course. Lisa, do you want to take back control?
And I'll stop sharing.
Table. And John, I think that was a great example of some of the concepts and the conversation that happens in a course like this. So I'm just going to go back to this and just give you a sense, a quick course overview, because I do want to save some time for questions. As you can see, we do go through all of these topics we've just discussed, and these are some of the more detailed descriptions of those and what we're doing. But I wanted to talk very briefly about some of the features of the course. Obviously, a huge advantage is learning from these two phenomenal faculty members. So learning from them, and the way that works is you learn through video lectures as well as live webinars, which I'll show you in a minute, just like this one, where we can have a conversation about it. But then there's another set of materials that are delivered over video lectures. In addition to the video lectures that you get every week, we have some really very cool hands-on activities. And to their point about, you know, you've got to get into the pool and get your hands on this technology, we have all sorts of different activities that give you that feeling of getting into the technology, such as creating your own cryptocurrency, for instance, or analyzing your own website to see how many third-party cookies are tracking. So, you know, lots of exercises. Here's another one, you know, around machine learning that gives you an opportunity to really experiment with these different tools and understand how they're used so that you can use them in your own life. So I think that's a really unique part of this course, and it makes it really exciting. As I mentioned, we have the faculty webinars where you can interact with these two, and those are a lot of fun, as well as we have learning facilitators who are accompanying you every step of the way on the journey through this material. So the MIT learning facilitators are experts in the field as well, who are there to answer your questions, give you feedback, moderate discussion boards, those types of things, and really bring another dimension to this course. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this course is brought to you by MIT Professional Education, which is really meant, their mission is to bring this incredible set of resources and research to a broader community. And that's just a little bit of information about the professional education arm of MIT. Just wanted to encourage you, if you have liked what you've heard today, to please go ahead and apply for the course. There is, I think we're going to put into the chat box the link if you'd like to go and find out more right now. But in the meantime, I think we should go ahead and bring up the Q&A box. We can spend a few minutes on the Q&A. I know we've got really a lot of questions here. And so I'm going to quickly, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at these yet or not, but
yeah, Lisa, I was looking at them, and one of the important questions was, do I need to have some computer experience? And what we'd say is, no, we'll provide all the kind of software or programming that you need. You probably need to have a laptop for sure, and you know, it would help if you've got some familiarity with that. But we'll basically walk you through these exercises. As Abel says, you know, these are the hello worlds. Actually, we're getting an echo from somebody.
I'll mute.
Yeah, I think, yeah,
Yeah, it
thanks.
was Lisa.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, that's much better. So you don't need experience in software to do this. Obviously, we'd like to encourage you to, be bilingual and learn a language, but you don't need it for this course. Our goal in the course is, for you to grasp the basics and then be able to educate yourself, the next steps in any of these areas. So we want to just get you onto that first ledge. After that, you can climb the rest of the mountain yourself, hopefully anyway. Abel, do you want to enlarge on that?
Just to mention that a lot of people that are pretty senior take the course, meaning that either they did not have a computer science background or they long ago left a technical field and that they found it accessible. There's some parts of it that are a little bit more painful, but we've iterated on those parts. And in general, like John said, our goal is to give you the 5-minute experience that can illuminate your thinking, and then leave it to you whether you want to take a deep dive or not.
Along those same lines, we have one person asking about if you are a technical leader, so somebody kind of senior but with a technical background, would this be a good course, do you think? Or is this more for people that are looking for an introduction?
I mean, well, my sense is that it's tough to cover all of these areas. It's probably taken Abel and I 20 years to cover from, IoT to machine learning. And we spend, all our hours basically testing these technologies. So obviously, if you're an expert, say, in cloud computing, that section might not be that relevant to you, but it'd probably be unusual for you to be an expert in that and in blockchain and in cybersecurity. So you obviously have to make that decision yourself. If you are an expert in all those, it's probably not the course for you. But if you want to, as we say, get onto the first steps so that you can ask the right questions and teach yourself the rest, then that's our goal.
Right, and along those lines, I at times like to give the example of the Intel engineer of the 1990s. Certainly, a technical leader and master in his space. But if you took that same person and you placed them in 2019 in the context of the technologies that we're talking about, there's a tremendous amount to learn here, right? Because again, it's not about the bits at the low level. It's more about the abstractions that we have been discussing throughout the course. And I think mastering those and getting that comfort takes quite a bit.
Yeah, and I'd say, you don't need to be, say, a mathematician. A lot of the breakthroughs, for example, in DevOps, a lot of that has come from lean engineering, from the Toyota production system, and it's basically about how does a pipeline, where you've got several teams, for example, developers, testers, people that are deploying into different environments. How do you get that team to perform? And what's happened over the last probably 8 years is that some companies now are performing 400 times better than others. And that's a scary number, that, companies are falling behind. And so everyone's trying to go through this digital transformation. It's not so easy. And that's our goal, is to highlight the technologies that you need to master, or at least think about, to enable you to play a part in this digital transformation.
And just to add to that's a really important point, that if you think about, the fast-moving companies, they're deploying several times a day versus the average in the Fortune 100, right? The leading companies in the world, they're deploying about once every 2 months. And so if you look around the world, organizations by and large are still in a model that does not allow them to compete with this new agile companies, right? And the technologies that are enabling this way of managing, this way of organizing these new products to be made all lie in this space.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. We have had a few questions about just the logistics of how it works. I know one person was saying, you know, I'm a full-time, I have a full-time job. Is this the kind of thing that I can do? And I think my response to that would be absolutely yes. That's the beauty of an online course. You can do it on your own time. And it does provide a lot more flexibility than doing something in class. I think the only synchronous parts of the course are the webinars, which are also recorded. So if you can't make those, you can always come to the webinars, or you can always watch them afterwards. So I just wanted to make sure we covered that, because I saw a few people asking logistical questions about, is this all online, or is there part of it that requires me to be somewhere? This is completely online, really ideal for a working professional. Let's see, we have just a few more minutes. I think we've covered a lot of people were wondering about that sort of, how technical is this course? Do I need to be able to code? Do I need to have a background in math? And I think we've already covered a lot of that. I know a number of people were asking about further resources. And maybe you guys, the last few minutes, what are some of your favorite resources that you recommend if people want to, in addition to this course, of course, but if they're interested in keeping up on these types of topics?
I mean, we kind of joke that we spend most of our time on YouTube these days. There's a tremendous amount of information there. I mean, you could take any of these topics and Google, and you'd probably find good information. I think the one where you wouldn't is in blockchain. I think there's a lot of disinformation up there. I mean, there's too much information, but no, I mean, there's plenty of really good talks up there. You were saying TEDx, you know, Abel gave a great talk on TEDx. Take a look at any of these areas. And the problem, I'd say, is that there's a blizzard of information. You know, if you want to go onto Amazon, you'll just find too much information there, and you won't know where to start. And it's not that easy. And I think we've spent a lot of time hacking our way through that jungle. So we've got a pathway. Certainly, we can maybe see the top of the mountain. We may not be at the top ourselves quite yet, but we've done a lot of the heavy lifting. And I mean, again, that's our goal. Is, you know, we want to show you a path that it won't take you to the very top of the mountain, but it'll get you a fair way up, and you'll be able to, you know, go the rest yourself. That's our goal. Abel, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, one of the things that John often tells me is, here, I'm going to save you some time, right? Meaning that he spent a week looking at some technology, and, you know, crack some insight. And that's pretty representative of what's happening today. We've gone from the problem being access to not being able to find the needle in the haystack because there's so much noise. If you think about blockchain, you do a search on Google, you're going to get millions of hits, right? Where do you start reading? What's the right level? And so all of these questions are things that, you know, we go through it ourselves. This is what we do for a living. You know, we're lucky enough to get paid for doing that. And it is something that we have looked at, not just, you know, for the last 6 months, we've been doing it all our lives, right? And so there's a number of resources. The question was resources, right? That we'll point you through as we navigate through the course. And there's a number of books as well. But the question of YouTube is a fascinating one. Of course, the question is, been able to find the right one, right?
You actually, Abel, I was just looking at all these comments, and there's obviously some really good resources right here in the people that are on this webinar. There's some very smart questions that will, hopefully we can pick up and debate and talk about during the course. But what I'd say as well is, you need to network. This is one way to start your network. That today it's easy to collaborate with people around the world. I saw there was somebody from Chile, and I'm coming down to Chile in 2 weeks. So I hope to say hello.
No, but that's a great point. The network is really powerful in these courses.
Yeah, and Lisa, maybe you want to say something about that. That from your experience, you can probably say how the networking works, because that's an important part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another one of the advantages of taking a course like this is entering into a conversation with others around these topics. And so we provide a lot of discussion boards and prompts to sort of get you thinking about these things and arguing about these things and responding to each other. It's a great way to learn from each other. Generally, we find in our courses that it's a fairly experienced group that comes into the courses, so there really is a lot that you can learn from each other as well as from the faculty. So I'm really glad you brought that up, John. And I'm also noticing that we are about out of time. So I'm afraid that we're not going to get to all of the questions that are still coming into the Q&A box. But that's why we have program advisors. So your program advisor is standing by, ready to help you understand if this is a good course for you, if it's a good fit. They have a lot of information about the course as well. So if you did not get a question answered today, please do reach out to them and ask them. And if they're not sure, they'll ask us, and we'll make sure to get you an answer. So John or Abel, any closing words before we wrap up the webinar today?
It's a lot of fun. You think it is a lot of fun. It actually is a lot of fun, and it gives you access into a world that opens up your possibilities and your thinking. Not only that, it continuously changes. So it's not like you go and you learn it and that's it, you're done. So we invite you to join us. We think it's tremendous fun. John.
Well, no, I hopefully just from this discussion, I mean, Abel and I talk and discuss things continually, that I'd say, every day we're discussing some topic or another, that it's an exciting world. There's the dark side of the cyber, which we'll leave for now, but there's a tremendous upside in understanding these technologies, that they're undoubtedly going to play, a huge role in shaping the world as we go forward. So, have fun, enjoy this course. Learning can be fun. There'll be some pain. We promise you that, but not too much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure to see everybody here, and I want to thank our two distinguished faculty for spending an hour with us today talking about this course. It's been delightful hearing from both of you. So hope to see you all on the course. It starts in just a few weeks, so do, if this sounds interesting and you'd like to learn more, please do reach out to us, and we'll get you registered for the course. All right. Thanks very much, everybody, and have a good day.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, team. Thank you, Meredith.
Take care.